The bronze spear tip caught the dying light of the sun as King Leonidas of Sparta surveyed the narrow pass of Thermopylae. Behind him, 300 of his finest warriors stood in perfect formation, their red cloaks billowing in the coastal wind like drops of blood against the gray stone. Before them stretched the only path between the mountains and the Saya gateway that would determine the fate of all Greece. "My lord," whispered Denix, his most trusted captain, "the Persian scouts report their numbers beyond counting. The great King Xerxes brings with him the armies of 100 nations." Leonidas gripped his spear tighter, feeling the weight of destiny pressing down upon his shoulders like the very stones of the pass itself. The oracle at Delphi had spoken her prophecy in riddles, as always, but her meaning was clear enough. Either Sparta would fall, or a king would die. He had chosen his path the moment he left his palace, kissing his wife Gorgo farewell, knowing he would never see her again. The Persian advance had been like a plague sweeping across the known world. City after city had fallen before the unstoppable tide of Xerxes' forces. Athens had been abandoned, its citizens fleeing to the islands. The great walls of Thebes had crumbled. Only here, at this narrow strip of land called the Hot Gates, could the Greek world make its final stand. According to historical accounts preserved by Herodotus, the Persian army numbered in the hundreds of thousands, some claimed over 1,000,000 souls, marching under the golden standard of the King of Kings. Against this vast multitude, the Greeks could muster only a few thousand defenders, led by Leonidas and his sacred band of 300 Spartan warriors. "Tell me," Denix Leonidas said, his voice carrying the authority of generations of warrior kings, "what do you see when you look upon those mountains?" The captain studied the jagged peaks that rose on either side of the pass, their summits lost in gathering clouds. "I see stone, my lord, stone that has stood since the gods first shaped the world. And what if stone teaches us about war?" Denix considered this, understanding that his king spoke in the old way, in the language of lessons that would echo through eternity. "Stone endures, my lord. It does not bend, it does not flee. It stands until the end of time, or until it is ground to dust. Then we shall be as stone," Leonidas declared, raising his spear toward the darkening sky. "Let Xerxes bring his millions. Let him darken the sky with his arrows. We are Spartans, sons of Lacedaemon, inheritors of a legacy written in blood and honor. This pass shall not fall while we draw breath." The wind shifted, carrying with it the distant sound of drums, not the familiar rhythm of Greek warfare, but something alien and vast, like the heartbeat of some monstrous beast. The Persian army was approaching, and with it, the darkness that would either consume Greece or be held at bay by the sacrifice of the few. As night fell over Thermopylae, the 300 Spartans prepared for what they knew would be their final battle. Dawn broke over the pass like a wound in the sky, painting the ancient stones crimson with the light of a sun that seemed reluctant to rise. From his position at the nearest point of Thermopylae, Leonidas could see them now, the forward elements of the Persian host. A dark tide flowing between the mountains like some primordial flood. The sight would have broken lesser men. Rank upon rank of warriors stretched beyond the horizon, their armor glinting like scales on some vast serpent. The immortals, Xerxes' elite guard, marched in perfect formation, their golden shields catching the morning light. Behind them came the Medes, the Sakai, the Bactrians, warriors from the four corners of the earth, united under the banner of the great king. "My lord," called Alpheus, one of the younger Spartans, his voice tight with the strain of maintaining composure. Surely the gods themselves could not stand against such numbers. Leonidas turned from his contemplation of the approaching doom, his scarred face stern but not unkind. "The gods, young Alpheus, have already chosen their champion. They have chosen us." He gestured to the narrow pass, barely wide enough for a few dozen men to stand abreast. "In this place, numbers mean nothing. Here, courage is the only currency that matters." The Persian herald arrived at midday, resplendent in silk and gold, riding a horse that pranced and snorted with nervous energy. Behind him came a small escort of cavalry, their weapons peace-bound but their eyes alert for treachery. The herald dismounted with elaborate ceremony, unrolling a scroll that seemed to glitter with precious stones. "I bring word from Xerxes, King of Kings, Lord of Lords, Master of the world," the herald proclaimed, his voice carrying the arrogance of absolute power. "The great king offers terms of surrender to the Greeks who hold this pass. Submit now and live. Your cities will be spared, your people enslaved but not slaughtered. Resist and face annihilation." The Spartans remained silent, their bronze-tipped spears held at the ready. The herald's horse stamped impatiently, perhaps sensing the tension that hung over the pass like a funeral shroud. "The great king is merciful," the herald continued, his voice now carrying a note of uncertainty. "He offers you a choice. Lay down your arms, and he will grant you positions of honor in his army. You may keep your weapons and march with glory under his banner." Leonidas stepped forward, his red cloak flowing behind him like a banner of war. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of 300 years of Spartan kingship, the weight of tradition and honor that could not be broken by mere words. "Tell your king," he said, his words cutting through the morning air like a blade. "That he may take our weapons when he pries them from our dead hands. Tell him that Sparta does not kneel, not to him, not to any man who calls himself king. We are free men, and we will die as free men." The herald's composure cracked slightly, perhaps seeing something in the Spartan king's eyes that spoke of an unshakable resolve. "The great king commands the loyalty of 1,000,000 warriors. What can 300 men do against such might?" Leonidas smiled then, an expression that held no warmth but infinite determination. 300 men, no, herald. 300 Spartans. Return to your master and tell him that if he wants this pass, he must come and take it. Tell him that we will hold this ground until the last man falls, until the last breath is drawn, until the last drop of blood is spilled upon these stones. The herald remounted his horse. His mission clearly failed. As he rode away, his escort following in obvious haste, the Spartans began their final preparations. They oiled their weapons, tightened their armor, and spoke quietly among themselves, not of victory, for they knew there could be none, but of honor, of duty, of the legacy they would leave carved in stone and written in blood. The attack came with the rising sun, a human avalanche that crashed against the narrow defile of Thermopylae like a tide against an unyielding shore. Xerxes had chosen his Median infantry to lead the assault 10,000 strong, their wicker shields painted with the eyes of eagles, their spears thirsting for Greek blood. Leonidas stood at the very tip of the Spartan phalanx, his bronze hopple and shield locked with those of his warriors, creating an impenetrable wall of bronze and iron. Behind the shield wall, the long Sarissa spears projected like the spines of some great beast, their bronze points gleaming with lethal promise. "Hold," Leonidas commanded, his voice carrying over the thunder of approaching feet. "Let them come to us. Let them break themselves upon our shields." The first wave of Persians struck the Spartan line with the force of a thunderbolt. Bronze clashed against bronze, iron bit deep into flesh, and the narrow pass filled with the screams of dying men. But the Spartan formation held like a rock in a storm, their shields locked so tightly that no Persian spear could find its mark. Behind the first rank, Phoenix fought with the cold efficiency of a machine built for war. His spear darted between the shields, finding gaps in Persian armor, sending enemies tumbling back into the press of their comrades. "Remember your training," he shouted over the din of battle. "Short thrusts, keep your shields up." The Persian dead began to pile before the Spartan line, creating a gruesome rampart of broken bodies and shattered dreams. Still they came, driven forward by the whips of their officers and the fear of their king's wrath. Wave after wave crashed against the bronze wall, only to be thrown back in bloody ruin. By midday, the pass ran red with blood. The Persian commanders, seeing their finest troops being slaughtered in the narrow confines, called for a withdrawal. Fresh troops were brought forward, the Sakai with their peculiar bows and battle. Then the Bactrians with their long cavalry lances adapted for infantry use. Historical records from this period, as documented by ancient Greek historians, describe the intensity of the fighting at Thermopylae as unprecedented even by the standards of Greek warfare, where close combat was considered the highest form of military art. Each new assault met the same fate. The Spartans, trained from childhood in the art of war, fought with a discipline that seemed almost inhuman. They moved as one organism, their shields rising and falling in perfect unison, their spears striking with mechanical precision. When a warrior fell, another stepped forward to take his place, the line never wavering, never breaking. As the sun began its descent toward the western peaks, Xerxes himself appeared on a golden throne carried by slaves, positioned on a hill overlooking the pass. The great king watched in growing fury as his armies were decimated by a handful of Greek warriors. He had conquered nations, humbled kings, brought the known world to its knees. Yet here, in this insignificant mountain pass, his advance had been stopped by 300 men who refused to acknowledge his divinity. "Bring forward the immortals," Xerxes commanded, his voice tied with rage. "Let my finest warriors show these Greeks what it means to face the chosen of Ahura Mazda." The immortals, 10,000 strong, advanced with the measured tread of professional soldiers. Their armor was the finest in the Persian army, their weapons crafted by the greatest smiths of the empire. They had never known defeat, never retreated from any battlefield. They were called immortals because when one fell, another immediately took his place, keeping their number always at exactly 10. But as they approached the narrow pass, they faced something they had never encountered before: men who fought not for conquest or glory, but for the simple right to remain free. The Spartans watched them come with the calm of men who had already accepted their fate, their spears steady, their shields bright in the failing light. The battle was about to enter its most crucial phase, as the elite of two worlds prepared to meet in single combat. The immortals advanced like a golden tide, their scale armor catching the afternoon sun, their spears held high in salute to their god. They moved with the confidence of warriors who had never tasted defeat, their faces hidden behind masks of beaten gold that gave them the appearance of divine beings rather than mortal men. Leonidas watched them approach with the calculating eye of a veteran warrior. These were not the conscripted levies of the morning's assault. These were professionals, the finest soldiers in the Persian Empire, each one worth a dozen ordinary men. Yet they would have to fight in the same narrow confines that had claimed their predecessors, and in that limitation lay the seed of their doom. Spartans, Leonidas called out, his voice carrying the authority of his bloodline and the weight of his city's honor. Before you march the immortals of Persia, the pride of the great king's army. They believe themselves to be gods among mortals. Today we will teach them that all men bleed the same color. The first clash came with a sound like thunder rolling through the mountains. The immortals struck the Spartan line with disciplined fury, their spears seeking gaps in the bronze wall, their shields pushing forward with irresistible force. But the Spartans gave ground only to draw them deeper into the trap of the narrow pass, where Persian numbers became meaningless and only skill and courage mattered. Captain Denix found himself face to face with a Persian champion, a giant of a man whose golden armor marked him as one of the immortals' elite. The Persian's spear thrust forward with lightning speed, but Denix caught it on his shield and riposted with a thrust that found the gap beneath his opponent's arm. The Persian fell, his golden mask staring sightlessly at the sky, and another immortal stepped forward to take his place. The battle raged through the afternoon with an intensity that seemed to shake the very foundations of the earth. The Spartans fought with the desperate courage of men who knew their cause was lost but refused to surrender their honor. Each fallen comrade was avenged tenfold, each backward step paid for in Persian blood. As the sun began to sink toward the western peaks, a new threat emerged from the mountain paths. Ephialtes, a Greek trader seeking Persian gold, had shown Xerxes the goat track that led around the pass. Now Persian troops were descending from the heights, threatening to encircle the Spartan position from behind. The news came from Alpheus, who had been posted as a lookout on the eastern ridge. "My lord," he gasped, stumbling down the rocky slope with blood streaming from a dozen wounds. "The Persians ... they come from behind. Thousands of them, moving through the mountain paths." Leonidas closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of destiny settling upon his shoulders like a funeral shroud. He had always known this moment would come. The oracle's prophecy had made that clear. Either Sparta would fall or a king would die. There was no third option, no miraculous salvation waiting in the wings. "How long?" he asked, his voice steady despite the enormity of what was to come. "By dawn, my lord. Perhaps sooner." The Spartan king looked around at his warriors, these men who had followed him into the jaws of death without question or hesitation. Most bore wounds, all showed the strain of continuous combat, yet none showed any sign of yielding. They were Spartans, inheritors of a warrior tradition that valued death before dishonor. "Then we make our stand here," Leonidas declared, his words carrying the finality of a funeral. "We will not retreat. We will not surrender. We will hold this pass until the last man falls. And when we are gone, let the world remember that free men stood here and chose to die rather than kneel." The immortals pressed forward again, sensing that the end was near. But the Spartans met them with renewed fury, knowing that each moment they held the pass was another moment for the Greek fleet to escape, another chance for their homeland to prepare its defenses. Leonidas stood at the nearest point of the pass, his shield arm hanging useless at his side, his spear broken off at the shaft. Around him, the remnants of his sacred band formed a final circle, their backs to the sea, their faces turned toward the approaching Persian tide. Behind them, the path to the south lay open. They could still retreat, still live to fight another day. But retreat was not in their nature, not in their blood. "My brothers," Leonidas said, his voice hoarse from shouting commands through the long night of battle, "we have done what we came to do. The Greek fleet has escaped. Our people have time to prepare. History will remember what happened here, in this place, on this day." Leonidas fought like a man possessed, his bronze sword cutting through Persian armor as if it were cloth. Beside him, Denix wielded his weapon with the skill of a lifetime spent in war, each stroke precise and deadly. Around them, the last of the 300 died as they had lived without fear, without surrender, without compromise. According to historical accounts preserved by Herodotus and later historians, the final moments of the battle saw King Leonidas fall beneath a storm of Persian arrows, his body pierced by dozens of spears, yet still standing until the very end. One by one, the Spartans fell. Alpheus died with a smile on his lips, his sword buried in the chest of a Persian champion. Pandatites, who had been sent away with dispatches and returned in time for the final battle, fell defending his king's body. Aristodemus, one of the few survivors, would later carry the tale of their sacrifice back to Sparta, where it would become legend. As the sun reached its zenith, the last Spartan fell. The pass was silent except for the moans of the wounded and the harsh breathing of exhausted Persian soldiers. Xerxes stood among the carnage, looking down at the body of Leonidas, and for a moment, even the great king seemed moved by the magnitude of what had transpired. "Cut off his head," Xerxes commanded finally, his voice tight with something that might have been respect or rage. "Mount it on a spike. Let all see what happens to those who defy the King of Kings."